I mean, it is the American pastime. It is played every single day.
It's an elegant sport played out on the field with 18 guys.
It's a generational sport. People have to understand it's a sport of fathers, sons, mothers, daughters.
And now baseball's been going since the 1870s. How many people do you think have played in the major leagues? Not even 20,000.
1 in 1,000 players get drafted.
When you know that only 3 to 7% of the guys that we even drafted signed, you know, you're talking about a business of failure.
You're 3 for 10 and you're a success? What other thing in life can you do that? To be 3 for 10 and you're almost like a Hall of Famer if you're 3 for 10.
For baseball fans, Cooperstown is a shrine. The Hall of Fame honors the greats of the game. And even in winter, people come to this small town in upstate New York to pay their respects. The election of individuals to be honored here began in 1936. As of 2023, a total of 342 people have been inducted, including 270 former Major League players, 40 executives and pioneers, 22 managers, and 10 umpires. Who you won't find here, however, are some of the most important people in developing the game of baseball.
So there are no baseball scouts enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame as scouts, but many of the enshrinees, the inductees, have had scouting as part of their career.
One of those enshrined in the Hall of Fame is Pat Gillick, who spent 27 years as a general manager in the big leagues, after first working as a scout.
I wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame if it wasn't for the people in scouting and player development. I mean, those are the people that deserve all the credit, not me.
Every job in baseball is a scouting job of sorts.
Scouts are the backbone of the game in every way.
It's the lifeblood of an organization.
Players don't know sometimes how much a scout is really believing in them.
Every major league player, every minor league player's career began because of the vision of a scout.
The scouts are unsung, they're underappreciated, they're under-recognized, and they're absolutely essential.
I think that everybody that is in this game probably caught that baseball passion, you know, the bug at a young age and kind of pursued it. And that's what makes it easy to get up and get on an airplane at 4 in the morning and do it again the next day and do it again the next day sometimes.
You might have covered Detroit, then you might have Evansville. You know, you might have to go from Evansville to Pittsburgh. You're not going to get home that often, you know. So it's tough on the kids, tough on the wife.
The evaluation part is not as hard as this and this, and so I think when people think, I'm going to go out and scout, I just go watch a game. I got a radar gun, I got a stopwatch, I got a notebook. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to time to first base, and I'm going to see how hard the pitcher throws, and I can be a scout. There's a heck of a lot more that goes into it than that.
But there's like a feeling in your gut that you just know, like, God, this guy wants it. You know, how much fun they have playing the game, how much fun they have working. Those are the big things that I try to find and look for.
scouts are one of the great stories in baseball. The story of scouts, the story of what they do. We have no idea who that first scout was. In the original iteration of minor league baseball, the minor league teams were not affiliated with major league ball clubs. And so minor league teams, local minor league teams, would go out and find the best ball players in their area. They would go to the semi-pro teams and the industrial league teams and the sandlot teams because somebody had given somebody on the minor league team a heads up, hey, this guy is pretty good.
Who are these people that devote their lives, almost entirely behind the scenes, to the game of baseball? And what led them here? The road to scouting is as varied and surprising as the scouts themselves.
My grandpa was a junior college baseball coach in Iowa and a high school baseball coach, and just going to the field with them and kind of obviously wanted to be a player at first, but you come to a quick realization that I didn't have the ability to be a player at a high level.
My love of baseball was instilled in me through my father, who he claims if it wasn't for baseball, he would still be working in a factory.
I loved baseball forever growing up. Played college baseball, was very lucky to do so.
I grew up a sports fan, just about every sport. Watched the Braves on TBS, like so many of my age did. I went to college and I was interested in sports broadcasting. So I started shooting sports and with video.
I was just a slightly above average high school player who had a couple of very, very small college offers to play.
Well, when I was 5 years old, I couldn't do anything. I played other sports, but I always loved baseball season. I loved the smell of the glove and the ball.
Well, I was an early graduate from high school. I was 16 years old, and I had a chance to sign with the Giants. My parents thought I was too young to go out at 16, and so I decided to go to college. So at the end of my college career, I ended up signing with the Orioles.
I'd had a good year in AAA. There was a hot shot that was behind me that was a high draft pick, and his name is Harold Reynolds. And when I watched him play, I realized that's what big leaguers look like.
I had some knee problems that pretty much wiped out the playing career. I started coaching some high school. I also had some summer teams that was called sandlot ball here in the Metro Detroit area. Had a couple of teams that won state, national championships. So the Detroit Tigers, who had seen me play when I was a player in college, they took note of that and thought, well, if he knows enough to win a couple, a national championship, some regional championships, maybe he knows how to secure talent.
Played college baseball, and I was actually coaching in college at Long Beach State University, and I met a guy named Lenny Strelitz who worked for the Texas Rangers, and I went to the Cape Cod League one summer. He asked me to write up some of the players that I had seen there. I came back home and said, "You want a job?"
I was fortunate to have coached for 12 years. And when they dropped the programs at the school that I was at, I had known enough of the area scouts that the area scouts heard that the program was being dropped, that I had 2 offers right away, and I was very fortunate that the Colorado Rockies picked me up.
And I worked for a few years as a writer at Baseball America, covering the game of baseball kind of at a grassroots level. And I started meeting guys that worked in scouting. And even though it was really never a career ambition of mine, I didn't really consider myself qualified to be a scout, quite frankly.
Kevin O'Sullivan at Florida took me to the Cape Cod League. I ended up coaching up there for 4 summers, and scouting directors would come by. Ben Charrington would come by, who's now the president of baseball operations for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He would come by and say, "Hey, who'd you see? Who have you seen?" And I would give them all the names that I had seen throughout the league, and they would go see them. And it kind of cultivated from there that, hey, have you ever thought about getting into scouting?
I never thought I would be a scout. I was looking to do anything to get into baseball. I didn't know what I wanted. They gave me a computer and an Adobe Elements program and said, "There you go, figure it out."
I retired. I had Tommy John in 2015 with the Cincinnati Reds. I signed a 2-year minor league deal with Baltimore after that, and wasn't quite able to get back. Had some shoulder problems, and I tried to make a comeback in 2018 and wasn't able to do it. I actually worked at UPS for 4 months for health insurance and keep things going afloat with the family. And I was fortunate enough to become an area scout for Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan for the Miami Marlins.
I got into the front office with the Rangers. I was very lucky to to get an internship my last year in law school, start while I was finishing school, and a job opened up, and it was, hey, do you want to work in international scouting? And I was like, what is that? And I'll do it.
It was weird because I was looking for a spot to be in player develop, you know, kind of like going through like being a manager or a coach. And then, you know, back then probably the only spot that was open for me was in scout.
I got an internship with the White Sox out of college, and you know, at first you're making copies and you're making coffee runs and things like that. You're working on game notes and doing some things. One of the things I really liked about the internship, I got to write a minor league report every day. My first full-time job was with the Cubs, so I went from the south side of town to the north side of town. And it was such a small front office at the time with the Cubs. I was assistant baseball operations, and I was a low guy in the totem pole. But we probably only had 7 to 10 people in the front office at the time. Larry Rothschild was the pitching coach of the Cubs, and every day he wanted somebody to chart the games, chart the pitches from the stands. I would go down with the charts, and I'd sit with the row with all the pro scouts. So here's a 22, 23-year-old kid sitting with all the, the older veteran scouts, and I think all the other scouts thought it was harmless. So I would bounce off ideas like, hey, I'd grade this curveball a 50 or a 60, and those are kind of the terminologies we use for scouting on a 20 to 80 scouting scale. But the older guys would say, hey, you're a little light on that grade, or that's a little heavy. And so I was able to start at a young age calibrating kind of my scouting eye.
When I was with Detroit, I was exposed to some real tremendous baseball people. Ed Catalinas was a scouting director, and he had signed Al Kaline and brought in Willie Horton and had things to do with bringing Denny McClain over from the White Sox. Ed was, and the guys, when I broke in, I was 25 years old when I was hired. Most of the area guys were 50, 60, 70 years old. Ed Catalinas gave me some great advice. My first meeting with the Tigers, he said, hey, Ken, listen. He said, you're not going to know blank for the first 5 years.
I thought I had all the answers when I got into scouting, and I learned how to listen and to the veterans. And I remember sitting around, just like we're sitting around right now, and I would have a little black book. I'd write down notes or something they said, and then I've still got that little black book.
It's amazing how many letters I would get over my desk as a general manager. How do I get into baseball? These are from doctors and lawyers, people with making a lot of money. They didn't care.
Baseball isn't just a business. It's not a sport only. It's a way of life.
To get to Major League Baseball from hard-working parents, and they taught me how to work hard, but, they they're from smaller towns in North Carolina, and then in Raleigh, then for their daughter to be with Major League Baseball. I've always been proud of that.
Men weren't the only scouts, by the way. There have been a few women scouts and more coming in now. One was Bessie Largent, who with her husband Roy were traveling all throughout, especially the Midwest, but all throughout the country. Now Edith Houghton had been a baseball player herself for a Philadelphia semi-pro team called the Bobbies. After World War II, she had been in the Women's Air Corps. She came back to the Philadelphia Phillies and said, basically, you guys are miserable, and they were, and I'm a Philadelphia native, and I would like to be a scout. She was recognized as the first scout on her own to be a woman scout.
These two early examples of women in scouting are not typical. Women have generally faced an uphill battle to enter the male-dominated world of baseball scouting.
Jenny Patton, she wanted to be called JD, but she's quite a lady. She's been a high school and a junior college baseball coach up in Tennessee, and she really could have been a full-time Major League scout, but back then the game was not going to allow it. She was passed over when we had a couple of scouting positions, and I don't know if you want this, but she filed a lawsuit against them.
But other women have found a way into the game. Christy Woods carved out her own niche in the Major League Baseball Scouting Bureau.
people see me, women see me, and they come up and talk to me, and I tell them all, all about it, and how I got there. And like I said, if someone has a passion for it, I think they're going to find it. You know what I mean? They're going to, that was my passion. Sports were my passion, so I found it, and kept going till I did.
Passion is certainly a prerequisite for a life in scouting. But to be good in this business, you have to have the right skill set, a little luck, and a lot of intuition.
The traits of a good scout basically are the work ethic, the drive, the will to be good, the want to be good. You got to be a self-starter in this business.
If you're the first one at the ballpark every day and the last one to leave, you'll stay in the game a long time, and that's what I do.
I always considered myself a gunslinger, a scout, that once I saw it and I felt it and I saw the player and the player, there's a feeling you get when you see a player that you really like.
And there's a lot more that goes into it than just going out into a game and saying, I watched that guy and this guy's gonna be a good player. My wife could have gone out and picked A-Rod out when he was a young kid and said he was a good player.
Every day you go to the ballpark, I think you're learning something. If you're not, then you're not paying attention. You see something new every day. You may not realize it at the time, but you see something new every day. And I'd like to think that makes you a better scout.
You have to self-reflect. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say when you were wrong, and really learn. I do a thing every year, every winter, where I go back over every draft list I have, kind of in a spreadsheet in a computer, and where those players are.
The amount of information, be able to dig through that information, sort through that information is huge in this job.
Work ethic, passion, intuition, imagination, and fortitude are the things that I look for in a person to be a scout.
We talk about the baseball gods every now and then, and I do have a firm belief, like if you go out every day and work hard and try to do the best at what you're doing now, like that will lead to better things down the line.
But knowing what makes a good scout is only part of the puzzle. There are categories of scouts too, all with different goals and objectives.
The role of the international scout is different than the role of the domestic scout. And the role of the amateur scout and the professional scouts are different. And you have to learn what the terminology means.
So the area scouts are kind of you call them the foot soldiers of the scouting department. They're focused on high school and college players.
Area scouts, they know everybody. Like they know in those states that they have, they know everybody pretty well.
Most teams have 15, 18 scouts around the country.
The area job is probably the hardest job in scouting because they're in charge from the ground up.
I feel like the area scout is a heartbeat of baseball because they're the first person that lays eyes on this future prospect, and their dream of playing baseball is in that area scout's hand.
They're the ones that are motivating young players to pursue this game, and it's their opinion, it's their expert evaluation that puts an organization in a situation to be successful.
When I started, the area scouts were basically kings. You had guys like Tony Lucadello, who signed 40 major leaguers during his time as a major league scout. He had Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, parts of Pennsylvania.
And for some baseball scouts, their area extends even further. These are the scouts that cover the rest of the world.
Se presenta la caja de bateo con el número 1, Adrián Rodríguez.
So I think you got to be really, really flexible and adaptive if you're an international. And I think we have a really cool subset of people in that, like, your flight might get delayed, you might end up in some random place that you don't know the language and you don't want to eat that or whatever it is, and you kind of got to roll with it.
Por Kansas City yo llevo scouting 47 años como scout en Puerto Rico, tratando de buscar los mejores talentos para nuestra organización Kansas City Royal.
My job for the Blue Jay, I'm the RF scout here in Puerto Rico. We do this event like one time in a year. We try to find that player with that projection, they can play big league in 4 or 5 years.
Down in the Caribbean, for instance, they're playing baseball year-round. The scout has got to be there because he's got to be able to see who's good, who's going to be good, who's up and coming. And as soon as they're eligible, you want to be able to sign them.
Above that, what I am now for the Texas Rangers, I'm a cross-checker, they call it, or a regional supervisor. But what I do is when an area scout finds a guy that they really like and they put a high grade on them, or they would take them in a higher spot in the draft, then what I do is I'm going in to compare that person, let's say in Florida, with the person in Ohio, or the person in Chicago with a kid in Puerto Rico.
I'm the second tier, so I get to roll into town and just write reports on players. I don't have to do all that stuff like I did before. The way I do it now, I do a lot of meetings with the guys because I want to know the kids. I want to know who I'm fighting for.
I don't think there's like a huge difference in the mindset of a cross-checker compared to an area scout. You know, I think the main purpose is to get different layers of evaluations on the same player.
Above that, you have some national cross-checkers is what they call them. They're kind of scouting the whole country, and they might just see the top guys in the draft, and then you have a scouting director who's the guy that makes the final call.
The relationship between area scout, cross-checker, scouting director usually is fairly symbiotic.
I was an area scout for 10 plus years, doing mainly in the West Coast, Southern California and Northern California. And then I was a regional West Coast supervisor for, 2-3 years, and the national cross-check for like 4. And then I think this is my, 9th draft as a director.
When I first started in 2009, my job was amateur scouting, international scouting, and pro scouting.
A professional scout is scouting the players on your own team to see who's ready to be moved up. And it's also scouting the players on other teams so that when an opportunity comes along to snag a ball player from another ball club, you'll know who you want.
Well, I am a pro scout. I do mostly minor league and major league coverage. But really right now you're looking at prospects in the lower minor leagues for possible trade candidates. And then at the major league coverage, you're looking at players that could impact your major league team sooner than later.
I used to see at games, especially when the Yankees heading into the playoffs, I'd see 20 scouts, in September at different games.
Kirk Gibson, who hit the tremendous home run off of Eckersley.
All year long, they looked to him to light the fire, and all year long, he answered the demands until he was physically unable to start tonight with 2 bad legs. The bad left hamstring and the swollen right knee.
The count was 3-2, a full count, but Gibson had an edge, and his edge was that professional scout Mel Didier had noticed that Dennis Eckersley had a tendency to throw an off-speed pitch, a backdoor cutter, which would come in closer and a little bit slower to Kirk Gibson, and that was something that would happen on a full count to a right-handed batter. And so that was the situation that Gibson found himself in.
High fly ball into right field. She is
But Didier was the one who was able to figure out that was a pattern. And if you know what the pattern is, you can pick the lock.
All baseball teams have scouts of one sort or another, but Major League Baseball has its own set of scouts too, designed not to support any one team, but to support the game as a whole.
I'll cover the East Coast for Major League Baseball, and I refer to myself as a video scout. My reports are with video. I see the higher interest talent, so I see, the best of the best.
For all of the major league teams, the Scouting Bureau does some basic level scouting so that every team doesn't have to have quite so many scouts out there.
Rockies scout, what he does is for the Rockies. And same with Yankees, Giants. I mean, their work stays with them. MLB, they had us to help with that, to help all the clubs know about most of the players. There are some scouts that, you have a player that isn't getting as much interest. And when I show up, that's all going to change. And I know it's like, oh, dang it, but it's in It's in a healthy way. It's in a good way. When it first started, it was VHS tapes. Now it's an MLB site called Clips.
Christy does a great job. You know, we have a lot of film in our system from our own scouts. You know, right now, basically, it's just going over players that I am not as familiar with, or maybe I've seen in the past, to see what they look like at a different time and point that when MLB got them.
I love that I'm neutral. I love that. Like, my work just goes to everybody automatically. So I just feel I just get to help the players, get seen more, get known by everybody, because they all see the film. I saw Justin Verlander, the first time I saw him, he was like 93, 94, maybe 95, but I knew Justin Verlander could do more. And so I saw him and I got the film and it went to every club, but I knew I had to go see Verlander again. So I went and saw him again and he threw better. I was really happy. Then that film went out to everybody. And then heard that Detroit, they did like him more. That's what I love about what I do. My job is to see what these players can do.
It's a really interesting way to look at baseball, and it's a very alien way for the baseball fan to look at baseball. I mean, when you're a Yankees fan or a Marlins fan or a Dodgers fan, you're looking at the team and you're looking at the ball players and you're seeing a great play, and you don't know what went into that great play. And the scouts are going, well, he made that great play because he actually has a particularly good jump on the ball and has got great speed, and that's how he was able to make that play. But that scout saw that 7 years ago, back in Iowa.
Whether a scout sees a player in Iowa, in California, or in Florida, the very heart of their work is the way they go about identifying talent.
Usually a scout in the area, for instance, California, he would pick out 4 or 5 players that he thought he had an opportunity to sign. And he would get close to those players over a period of time. He might have first scouted the young man in the 10th or 11th grade, and he would get close to the family and get close to the young man and really almost be a part of the family for 3 years before he graduated.
Back in the, I would say, the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, scouts really relied on their instinct and their eyes. I mean, they could see if a player could play.
When I'm evaluating, especially high school kids, just natural talent. Who has natural talent and who has skill?
Basically, you're gathering information, as much information you can about all of the players. 5 tools: hit, power, run, throw, and field. Well, the scale is the scale for a reason, and it's 2 to 8, and 8 being outstanding, 7 being very good, 6 being good, 5 being average, 4 being below average, and then 3 is well below average, and 2 is poor. We're always looking for those 5, 6, 7s, and 8s. There's just not a lot of them out there, especially on the run scale.
I'm a tool guy. I'm definitely a tool guy that hit, run, throw, field, hit with power. That's always been the way that I went with position players. With pitchers, I've been a delivery guy for as long as you can go back. I don't think you can be successful as a pitcher if you can't repeat your delivery. And so I'm more on deliveries than I am on arm strength, because if you have a good delivery, you can learn how to pitch, you can learn how to move the ball around. If you don't have a good delivery, then you can't get in sync.
I would say the true measurements are the 60-yard dash, because that doesn't lie, the stopwatch doesn't lie, whatever the player runs a 60-yard dash in, or what is their time from home plate to first if we're actually scouting a game. The radar gun is important with pitchers, so obviously you're gonna get the velocity of their fastball, you're gonna get the velocity of their curveball.
The two-seam fastball is what makes it move and gives it life, because it hits the seams. And if you got good wrist pop on it, then it could really sink a lot. You know, move around, dance a lot. That's why the two-seam fastball is always the best, because what causes hitters the most problems is the ability of the ball to move.
We're really looking for good athletes that can run. And if they can hit and they have power, they're Mike Trout.
You see the players yourself in the summer. And in the fall, you also have fall ball, where you go to like colleges and kind of just see who they have on their rosters for the spring. They do scout days and you kind of get to see. Once the spring starts, you you mostly go after, you know, the higher interest guys first. And then the season kind of is like an amoeba after that. Some players that were higher interest, they are doing better. Some, they're kind of slow start. And so you just kind of keep going with the names you knew, but while you're at a game, you learn about a kid that's also on the team that's doing very well. So then you start watching him and get film on him. And then you'll have a guy that is starting out the year okay, then all of a sudden they're throwing 98. And they just kind of just step it up. Like from the summer, you're like, he was 92 in the summer and now he's 98. So then you go to see that player.
There's an innate, I think, feel that the real good scouts have. Something where you know when you see something. You're looking to see, does he have bat speed? Can he control the barrel of the bat? How's he getting it out front? You know, is he sweeping the bat? You're looking how he tries to time the ball, how long the swing is. You know, the shorter your swing is, you know, Barry Bonds probably had the shortest swing in the history of baseball. He took his bat from right here and was right in the zone. That's why, you know, the guy walked 200 and some times one year and he hit all those home runs. He could wait until the ball was right on him before he used that bat. That's what you're looking for, is to determine whether or not this guy, the mechanics that he has, can you fine tune that?
In Florida, you got what we call pretty boys. They're smooth, they're natural, they really woo you with their actions, what we call baseball actions. Hands and everything smooth and all thing, it looks good. But can you project where he's going to end up 3 to 5 years from now? Then I got to go up into Georgia, and you got crude athletes up there. But the crude guy's got all the tools, so we can project more on him because he's further behind if he gets the right kind of instruction.
I believe, you know, my personal opinion is like when you're scouting, you kind of like, you have to dream. You have to dream about the player, you know, how he's going to be 5 years from now, you know, how he's going to develop into that player that you're dreaming of, that guy.
Besides projecting the physical development of an athlete, a baseball scout must also be able to look inside to evaluate the player's heart and mind. Scouts call this makeup.
I was 80% physical ability, talent, and I was probably 20% the mental aspect of the game. I'm probably now closer to 50-50. If a player doesn't have the passion, if he doesn't have the work ethic, then he's not going to be successful. And the most difficult thing, I think, for young people coming into professional sports, it's how to accept defeat and bounce back.
And I think that's a big deal, is how these kids in college and in high school, how they deal with adversity, how they deal with failure, because you're going to get your butt kicked. It's just about getting back up the next day and sticking with your routine.
Art Stewart from the Kansas City Royals talked about you could only see the outside half of the ball player, that is what his skills were, but you also had to know what the inside half was. And the inside half is the head and the heart.
You know, there's 5 tools of the player. The 6th tool is kind of the makeup of the player, the personality of the player, the background of a player. I think there are a lot of times where kids have the talent and the ability to take that next step and play professional baseball. But the question is, are they ready? Certainly out of high school. You want to know, can this kid handle it, you know, being a job?
The hard part is getting through the workouts. To me, the work, the daily routine is harder than the game. The game's fun because you put the uniform on and all the people are in the stands. But if you're not willing to grind out the tough days, the minor league days, the bus rides, you know, game 82 in the middle of the summer when it's hot, if it's not fun for you doing that, you're gonna have a hard time.
If you have 2 guys with equal ability, okay, you always lean toward the guy with the strong makeup. It's that guy that you want off the bat when the game's on the line, on the mound, when it's time to get that last out.
Makeup is who this player is and his overall love for the game. And almost to the point, to a fault, that he can't live without the game.
You gotta love the game. Gotta love it. If you don't love baseball, you're gonna get exposed. It's just a matter of time.
It really comes down to the people who have a really good head on their shoulders, who know what they want, who know how hard it is, but know how bad they want it.
Well, there's on-field and off-field makeup. You got to kind of separate the two. On-field makeup, you want to, a kid that's really going to compete, be a good teammate, plays hard, and just has that winner makeup that you know what you're going to get on a day in, day out basis. Off-field makeup is he's a good person in his community. He's probably a good family kid, close to his family, and some kids don't have that. You really got to dig as an area scout, know who the player is.
You got to get great information. You got to talk to people. I talk to grandma and grandpa and mom and dad, and then I go over to the other side that they're playing against, the player I'm looking at. Hey, what do you know about this guy here?
You got to talk to his school counselor, you got to talk to his coach, you got to try to talk to his teammates, you got to try to talk to students, and try to find out just what kind of guy this is. Is he a good baseball player, and is he a good human being?
When I look to sign a player, it's like when you invite someone to your house. You're not going to invite anyone that you don't know. You don't know how that people is, or if he's going to behave, if he's going to be a good person.
You'd be surprised how they watch a player after they strike out. What's their reaction? What do they look like walking back to the dugout? What do they look like on the field? What do they look like when they're running on and off the field, a position player?
Because you're signing kids that are coming out of high school that might have played 30 games, and now they're going to go play 120 games. And they're going to be away from home. You got to be able, and you got to be a little bit of a psychologist, psychiatrist.
If a family is going to entrust you as an organization to take their son and help them grow as a person, we do a lot with our minor leagues, especially with the high school kids and the kids from Latin America, help them become upstanding young men. There's a lot of things that, you go to college, you have some life experiences. Well, we want to give you some of those experiences within professional baseball too. You have to learn how to do your laundry. You have to learn how to live on your own. And
pro ball was different at first. I was a homeboy kid. I never, close to my family, never been away from home for very long. So that's something you experience as soon as you get drafted. I go from being in Kentucky to going to rookie ball in Arizona, in Arizona Ball Rookie League. And, you're with different backgrounds, you learn a whole lot. It's you go through adversity, but it really makes you find out who you are and what you're about.
I want these guys to be successful, because if they're not successful and I draft them and put them in the race, I'm a failure. But you got to get all kinds of information, and then then you write the report and put it in the computer and send it off, and then you're on to the next one.
You're hoping every time you walk into that ballpark to find the one player that can make a difference in your team winning a championship, down the line. It might be 5 years down the line, it might be 10 years down the line, but that's what we strive for in the end.
I'm sort of a first impression guy. If I see somebody, something kind of clicks. I don't know if you want to call it intuition or it's an intuitive or what. Something kind of clicks inside of me that gets me. Well, sometimes it gets you a little bit trembly, to be frank. You get a little bit chilly.
So you see anything you like so far?
Sure. Yeah. Big pitcher is up to 95. It's at 91, 95 with a fastball.
In March of 2020, the scouting world was turned upside down.
This morning, a major development as U.S. officials work to learn more about the mysterious new coronavirus and keep it out of the country.
The first case of the deadly Chinese coronavirus making its way to the U.S.
All right, we continue to follow breaking news here that Major League Baseball will, in fact, suspend all operations indefinitely.
Everyone from game day operations people, we're talking about concessionaires, parking attendants, ticket takers, ushers, any sort of stadium operations people, all the way up and down the chain, they're alerted to the fact that, hey, right now we will have no events going on at Marlins Park or at Yankee Stadium, wherever the case may be.
The Pirates are furloughing some workers. The team says it's kept all full-time employees on the payroll through May, but will start furloughing some business operations employees on June 1st. Other employees who remain on the job will start seeing pay cuts. There's no timetable for Major League Baseball to start.
You know, the pandemic, everything just shut down. I mean, you couldn't do anything.
I think everyone can probably tell you where they were on Friday the 13th in March of 2020. I know I can.
We heard like the Ivy League had canceled their season. We're like, they canceled their season? Like the season, the whole thing?
I was driving, I believe, from Texarkana, somewhere up there, down to Louisiana, going to see a kid. We get there, I'm like excited to see him because he's throwing, and I got somebody else done, so I was rushing down there. Got there, pulled out my car, walking up to the ballpark, and no one's there.
I began kind of looking through some high school and junior college games that had not yet been canceled, and I drove all the way up to Ocala from Tampa in hopes of seeing a high school position player. Unfortunately, about 11 o'clock that morning, his game was canceled. So I had a backup game on the other side of Orlando, so I drove south, and by the time I got to that particular area around 1 or 2 o'clock that afternoon, that game had been canceled.
There was one more game the next day. I hadn't been pulled off yet, so I could go to it. It was only like me and 2 others, because slowly but surely everybody was pulled off the road. And so like we were the only ones. So I got BP on the kid, and right after BP, game was called. So it's just the most uneasy feeling. Like, just you didn't know when things would go back or how they'd go back.
So we were in the middle of spring training, and I mean, we came in off the field one day, and they just said, hey, we're gonna pause spring training for a little while, and the very next day they said, hey, it's a lot more serious than what we thought. We're gonna send you guys all home and shut down the complex. So a couple of guys stayed in the Detroit area, and I was lucky enough to kind of keep training with them. And then the colleges got sent home, so then a couple college guys were looking for places to train and things to do. Next thing you know, there was 20, 25, pro or high Division I, baseball players kind of met up at some random field, and then closer and closer to spring, we ended up playing some real games, and it was some of the better baseball we've ever played, and it was just a bunch of guys kind of playing pickup baseball.
The budgets are so tight right now. Like I'm not on expenses right now. I mean, they gave us like, okay, you get $1,000 in mileage a month right now, and I'm already over, but I'm still gonna work, right? I mean, like, that's what we do as scouts, and this is the first time this guy's pitched all summer, and of course we're gonna go watch it,
Oh, yeah. They're not making it.
They're talking about letting the Tigers have any fans at all this year, do you think? No.
I don't think so.
So this is a college summer league that's kind of popped up in Brighton, Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit, Ann Arbor area. And generally, like the pitcher we're looking at today is the number one pitcher for Xavier University out of Cincinnati. You got the Michigan starting third baseman in this league. There's actually one of the top high school players in the country playing in this league too. A lot of these guys normally would be in the Cape Cod League, and that league shut down because of the virus, the COVID virus. So you've seen leagues like this pop up all over. Indianapolis, there's a league. Joliet, Illinois, there's a league. 4 teams playing in Normal, Illinois. 4 teams in the Northwoods League are playing in Kalamazoo. So these are all within driving distance of us. What kind of the limitations that are put on us this year, this summertime, where normally I'm on airplanes and flying around the country, we're kind of put my area scout hat back on and get in the car and drive around. So it was a 2.5 hour drive over for me today. And you can see there's probably 8 to 10 scouts here today, just getting a look at a guy that we may or may not see in the fall.
I remember that was the first spring I had taken in like 20 years. Like the first spring I had truly noticed like the flowers coming up, trees getting their leaves.
And I got to be with my family. So there's been years where all these scouts, not only myself, but a lot of scouts were on the road so much that time at home gets kind of neglected. So that was a good time for me.
There's a little bit of all of us that probably work too hard. I mean, I think most baseball people, we on a drop of a hat, we'll get on an airplane and go across the country, and we're away from our families for a long time. I mean, there was a long period of time where we were home, and I think it puts things in perspective.
The pandemic was a period of deep introspection about life and work. And baseball scouts spoke of the toll that years of travel, along with a relentless schedule, took on their personal lives.
You're gone from home an awful lot.
We're on the road, we're traveling salesmen. Our second child, I was in North Carolina on a pro scouting assignment, and she called me and she says, John, It was 3 weeks early. This child is coming, you need to come home. So I packed up my stuff and I left and came home.
They say, well, you get winter off. Well, you know how long the winter is? November, December, and January, part of January. And, you know, it's not much.
The guys that live in the southern areas, they're pretty much year-round.
Baseball in Florida really doesn't shut down very often. You know, you can work, it's an 11-month job down here.
You know, I mean, I used to go to Latin America every winter and spend a lot of time in Latin America.
If I'm going for a trip, you know, sometimes it's 10 days, you know, you get back and take a day or two off. I would say a day off. During the scouting season, you're not taking 2.
I have 3 kids, 6, 3, and 2 years old, and my wife's working from home and dealing with 3 kids, and I've been gone for 3 weeks. So it takes a toll on a family, but just like in baseball, being a player, having a good family backbone and understanding, and them having an understanding of what it takes to do our job on a day in, day out basis, it's very important.
I carried one of those big cell phones, you know, it didn't even hardly fit in your back pocket. I mean, I had a scout from another organization one time said, Preston, is that a cell phone in your back pocket? So I might have been one of the first to carry a cell phone, but I was carrying it because at 9 o'clock every night my daughter went to bed and I called to tell her I loved her and that I missed her and see how her day was. And
the last 10 years or so, I was probably spending 150 nights in hotel rooms. You know, and you know, you get on an airplane. If you're a cross-checker, you could fly in a different plane every day of the week.
When I first started doing it, I had Puerto Rico, Florida, up to Maine, Alabama, Tennessee, and Canada.
When I was single, I didn't take a day off.
You know, you're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours maybe, eating a lot of junk food.
You know, when you're a scout, you're a scout.
I did it for, I don't know, 30-some years. And I'd be on the road 120 nights a year. I don't know how many million miles on Delta.
I spend 230, 40 nights a year on the road in a hotel room, and I've sacrificed a lot for my family.
But I missed my family, and then ended up losing my family because that's just, you know, just the way it goes.
I was fortunate. My wife was a school teacher and principal. You know, we've been together now for 45 years, you know. But it does take a strain on a lot of the marriages when the guys can't get there, you know, and it's not their fault. It's just the job itself.
My wife is she's not a needy person. She's a very independent person, and I think that's, if you're married to a scout, the spouse has got to be, she's got to be independent. She can't be too needy because we're gone so much of the time, and she has to understand exactly what our job is all about.
I met my husband, and then, you know, we started dating about 2005, and we knew off the bat we kind of had something good, but just had to, you know, explain to him this baseball world and this baseball life, and he's a mechanic, so I drive for a living, so we have the perfect partnership there.
I'm lucky to find my wife, Angie, and she, you know, we dated for 5 years before we even got married, you know, as I was scouting. So I think she understood the pressures and all that, but you certainly need a support system, you know, from family, from parents, from grandparents.
I worried, could I, you know, have a child and do this? Well, I mean, the first trip I had to leave her, it was devastating. I mean, oh gosh, I cried so much, you know, just cried so much. But I had family, you know, at home, my mom, you know, and others to help me with her.
My wife's outstanding. I get emotional with this because she's been great. I mean, she traveled all over the United States with me. Used to go to games all the time. Then when I was managing, she'd pack up and go. She's great.
I know for a fact that my wife wishes I was still on the road a lot more than I am now, okay, because I kind of cramp her style.
It's always worked out pretty good for me. Our kids were born in May, June, and July. They weren't born around the draft.
Most baseball weddings are in November. We got married in November. That's when baseball people, that's when you get married. You're getting married in the off season. You don't get married during the season.
I just wish I could have been there home more than I was, but that was a job, and I had to do it. So, or I felt like I had to do it, and I wanted to do it. So, things have worked out. We've married 51 years now.
I never thought of it as sacrifices. I loved being around the game of baseball as a player, as a coach, as a scout. Not only, basically in scouting, you have a family, not only your family at home, but you have a family on the road too.
But because of COVID, the road was now very, very different. And travel presented perhaps the greatest challenge to the work of the baseball scout.
We kind of took it for granted in a way before. From a travel perspective, life is easy. You go wherever you want. You don't have to take a COVID test. You don't have to look up what the travel restrictions are in the country that you're going to or city you're going to.
The traveling part of our job during the pandemic has probably been the greatest layer of added stress. Whether it's not safe to go into a restaurant, whether or not it's safe to sit at a ballpark in a crowd of fans.
It's been hard, especially the first year. We weren't able to see the players the way we want to. So we have to go watch a lot of videos from those players, and then specifically here in Puerto Rico, we only have probably one workout. We were able only to do one the whole year, so it was hard. And if it was hard for us, I believe it was even harder for the players.
In June of 2020, a consolidated Major League Baseball draft was held entirely online. Nothing like it had ever happened before.
Good evening. On behalf of Major League Baseball, we welcome you to our 2020 draft. Throughout tonight's broadcast, we will be honoring some of the frontline heroes who are lifting up their fellow citizens during the pandemic. As we continue to work towards safely resuming play, we congratulate the young players, their families, and their coaches on this important night.
We had one meeting earlier today, and now we've got a couple different Zoom rooms set up. I've got all of the area scouts I work with on the Zoom here, and we're kind of tied into Kip, and John Daniels, our GM's basically at his house. It's just a unique year in terms of everybody's kind of separated, and we're all on Zooms kind of communicating that way.
In the 2020 draft.
Wow, Kansas City got to take Lacey, dude. That's like a gift that fell on your lap.
With the third pick of the 2020 MLB draft, the Miami Marlins select Max Meyer, a right-handed pitcher from the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, Kansas City last year's draft took all pitching though. Remember they went all college pitching?
I worry about the overall health of the game with the pandemic because scouting's all about people and the fact that you can't get close to people. You can't meet the families, you can't really talk to them. All you can do is talk to them on a Zoom call. It doesn't really paint the picture of who someone really is.
I'm still not quite sure how that 2020 draft is going to shake out. I think we made some good picks, and I think not being able to meet with the players individually or see them play quite as much as we would have in the past may wind up really causing some downside in that draft as well.
For baseball scouts, the annual MLB draft is the culmination of years of hard work. But baseball didn't always have a draft.
In the days before the draft started in the mid-1960s, baseball scouts could simply go and sign whomever they chose, whether they were Americans or international, so long as they were of age. And if they weren't of age, that is the ball players weren't of age, then the scout would simply sign them anyway and have the player's parent sign underneath. That's how Bob Feller got signed. He was a high schooler out of Van Meter, Iowa, well recognized as being one of the best in the state. A scout heard about him, went to see him, thought he was great, and signed him on the spot. Hand wrote out a contract, had Bob sign it, had his father sign it, and that made Bob a professional baseball player.
Any organization that wants to have a sustained period of success, what you need to have talent consistently coming in the pipeline. With amateur scouting, what we're trying to do every year, we have a draft. We have an opportunity to bring in 20 players, 30 players.
Every draft I've been in, it's been on the third floor here. There's a room we have down there reserved for a draft, and basically we're kind of holed up into that war room, and we're in there kind of going over every scenario possible and talking with the guys we like and trying to get more information, updated information as it goes until we start picking.
every draft pick has a story. The high draft picks always get the publicity, but I think that in every draft I've been in, and certainly as an area scout, you take pride in getting those big leaguers later in the top 10 rounds, getting those big leaguers after the top 10 rounds.
Scouting is subjective. I mean, you've got some players that everybody loves, and then you got some players that some are a little more in on than others.
It takes time to get to that point where you're all in on somebody, and that's throwing the makeup in there, throwing the work ethic in there, all of it. Is this the guy I want to put in this spot, and how do I want to talk about him? I mean, you can't fight for everybody.
No one knows if that All-Star is going to come in the first round or the 20th round. I mean, Jack Powell drafted Jose Bautista out of Chipola Junior College in the 31st round, and Mark McKnight was his cross-checker. No one knew he'd make, close to 100 million, hit 35 home runs.
I'm a high-risk, high-reward guy.
Okay.
If you don't shoot for it, you're not going to get the Mike Trouts. You're not going to get the Greg Maddoxes.
The more interesting players you get, the more big leaguers you can get into your system every year through the draft, whether they play with your team or you're able to you trade them for a player that you need at the big league level. Every year you need to keep acquiring players that have big league ability. Even if it's a left-handed specialist out of the bullpen that you get in the 17th round, those guys are really valuable on a major league roster, and the acquisition cost wasn't high because where they went in the draft.
Basically, you have a pool of money within the top 10 rounds. And each pick, like we picked 7 in the country last year, so that pick was slotted a certain amount of money. And every pick in the top 10 rounds is slotted a certain amount of money. And so if you sign a guy for less than that money, you save the money. If you sign more than that money, you had to take some from somewhere else.
The draft has become much more like a puzzle than it is, a true draft. It's in ways it's better than it used to be, because it used to be the teams with the most money could just go buy as many players as they wanted because there was no limit on what you could spend. The way it is now, there's limits, but you're still trying to get the most players and the most good players. So in the end, we spend 2 weeks stacking up our boards. All of our area scouts come in and talk about their players and their list that they have in their area, their 40 or 50 players they turn in. We do 4 or 5 days of that. And then the cross-checkers like myself, our scouting director, our analysts in the draft room, everybody as high as the GM is in there. And we're talking for, 10 days, 2 weeks after that, kind of putting our draft board in order.
It's baseball. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's baseball. I mean, the fans, the people not in the room with us don't know what we do every day, which is they'll never know unless you do it. But by the time we get to the draft, we have everything done. It's such a relief. And when those guys sign that paper and 3-4 years down the line, they debut, there's nothing better than that.
Baseball's a little different and unique, more so than like NFL, NBA, some of the major sports. In fact, is we could draft and sign high school guys, and plus there's a minor league system.
90% of the minor leaguers wash out. It's so hard to get into the major leagues that 9 out of 10 of the minor leaguers that you draft never make it to the majors.
For the ball players, the scouts that help position them for selection in the annual MLB draft represent a pathway, however narrow, to the big leagues. And every player remembers how they got there.
Back when I was coming up, they had the big trial camps. A team would send you a letter, say it was the Mets or the Pirates. They would get a letter, but they'll send it to your high school coach. And those camps usually happen in June, the summer. But I just remember just being overwhelmed, being out there around all those players and seeing the professional scouts, and me wanting to be a professional baseball player. I knew that if I did something to impress those guys, I just try to do something to catch their eye, that that they'll at least follow me.
I think my first memory of baseball scouts was sometime around high school, early high school. Junior and senior year, I started kind of seeing the same guys coming around pretty frequently. But one that really stuck out was Juni Melendez with Cleveland Indians. He ended up being at pretty much every workout that I was going to, every game. He was by far the one I had the most contact with. And then ultimately I ended up getting drafted by Cleveland. So I think he was high on me from the get-go.
They kept sending me to go run 60s against college kids on Saturdays. The scouts would come pick me up. It was crazy. I had no idea what was going on. I just show up, run, go play in a doubleheader on Saturdays and Sundays, get a couple more ABs and go home and go back to school, and like nothing happened. And towards the end of the year, the draft came around and my name got called. I didn't know my name got called because back in those days, it wasn't on the computer or anything. Got a phone call and I went to school like it was a normal day on draft day.
For me, Mike Gibbons, who was the area scout for the New York Yankees, I can remember sending a letter in the mail, invite me to the East Coast Pro Showcase. And I ended up, it's the first showcase I think I went to, I ended up throwing the ball well. And my first game of my high school career, I had 15 scouts there. But Brian Williams is one of them. And really Brian, from then on, I could remember seeing about every other game I threw, Brian would be there.
Today, showcases are big business. They're also a way for players to get seen by scouts. But COVID disrupted opportunities. In October of 2020, the World Wood Bat Association moved its annual showcase to Fort Myers, Florida, to play ball.
This is the biggest event of the year. It's hundreds of scouts down here. We was able to put this team together to give kids opportunity.
Developing a young ball player is expensive. Besides equipment, there's the cost of travel teams and private coaching, expenses that can total thousands of dollars a year. Since 2007, former Major League player Lou Collier has been creating opportunities for inner-city players who might otherwise not be able to participate in a showcase. And baseball scouts themselves are working to help young players get the exposure and experience that they need.
A scout team is us going out and getting players and providing them an opportunity who normally wouldn't have it. Originally, it was an idea to get the best prospects that we can get from Canada and Puerto Rico, and then handpick any other guys that we thought weren't able to come with their travel team and give them an opportunity to play with each other and then play in front of all the scouts here. You know, a lot of people don't realize that these travel ball programs, they are a very legit money-making business. For us to be able to put together this scout team and give players an opportunity to play free of cost, I don't know, we're trying to level the playing field.
The United for Change name, we came up with that this year. You know, with everything that's going on in 2020, it's been a rough year.
The game was stopped at 8:46 p.m. local time, that time representing 8 minutes, 48 seconds, the amount of time Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck. It has been 2 months since Floyd died. His death sparked protests across the country, calling out racial injustice and police brutality.
I tell a lot of people I wear a lot of hats. I started Lou Collier baseball when I retired. You know, me coming from the inner city, I wasn't really prepared for what I was getting ready to go through. It was baseball, but then off the field it was a whole different, you know, ball game. It was a lot of things that I needed to learn, how to become a professional, how to carry myself off the field, how to prepare myself, and you know, that's why I started my program, to pay it forward.
Moving forward, the game's only going to survive by the players and the guys out watching the game. And a scout's job is not just to watch the players that fit into the profile of being professional baseball players, but we also play a big role in giving back to the game and calling college buddies and telling them about this guy we had seen and really trying to grow the game.
You know, the old school scouts, they turned over every rock. If they had an area, they wanted to know it, upside down, inside out. They didn't want to miss on anybody. If they saw a kid with some potential, they stayed with them, and they gave them opportunity. I think nowadays, a lot of the scouts scout the scouting services, right? They're on the internet. They're about the hot name. They want to be the sure thing. Baseball is not about that. A kid like me in this day and age never would have had the opportunity. I was a raw kid, so I would have just been overlooked. If I couldn't come, if I wasn't able to afford any of these events, you never would have heard of Luke Collier at all. But back when I was coming up, the scouts found the Luke Colliers.
I think the pandemic is affecting our lives going forth in so many ways.
There is some feeling of, wow, the industry may be changing. You know, there's a lot of people that we know and that we're all friends with from other organizations that were out of jobs. You know, overall, I think we're going to come out of this pandemic strong now. I hope going forward we can say the same.
It's fair to say that COVID accelerated a number of changes that were already taking place in the world of baseball scouting. And one of the biggest changes has been the growth of analytics.
You know, in baseball, you've got to adjust. The hitters have to adjust, the pitchers have to adjust, the scouts have to adjust.
It's a hard business, and the more information you have, the more details you have on certain player, the better decisions you're going to make.
What analytics does is it's black and white. I mean, it's you know, it's exit velo, there's launch angle.
They know everything that a kid did. They know how much the ball spins when the pitcher throws it, what kind of trajectory it has out off the bat, how hard it comes off the bat.
I'm considered old school, you know, because I kind of started without all that information, but you know, it is helpful, and it is something that doesn't drive our process, but it's a part of it.
You know, the general managers and guys that are calling the shots right now, a lot of them are guys that are analytic guys.
The analytic guys have a lot of good information, and when it's coupled with what the guy sees down there on the field, then you got a good report. You know, you make the report better by using that analytics. And there's some things that the analytics will catch that the guy down there on the field doesn't catch.
I've always felt that you make your own evaluation, and then you validate your judgment based on the analytics, based on the data, based on the statistics.
The resources in baseball that have become available in recent years, it's been out of this world in terms of the arrow up. We have more material at our disposal. We have more technology at our disposal. We have, frankly, so much that you've got to prioritize what is important to you, what you think matters and is practical to implement, and what is white noise.
Analytics and video has not replaced the scout, but has certainly diminished his input, I think, as far as judging the talent.
I wouldn't say it's positive or negative. I would say that it's created new opportunities for people who have never put on a jockstrap before.
I don't like where it's gone with too much analytics.
You hear everybody talk about analytics. We did analytics back then too, but here's what we did. We evaluated the player, the tools, and when our scouts said, we think this guy has the ability to play in the big leagues, the next thing we did was we gathered all the information we could, analytics, but then we emphasized makeup.
If you take that part of it out of the game, there's so many guys in the Hall of Fame. There's so many guys that are, you know, drafted late, that signed late, that one scout saw one thing in this player. You're going to take the color and the beauty out of the game.
There are times where guys are trying to throw a curveball, but their arm slot, their arm action maybe is better suited to a slider. Well, their analytics are going to show you that it's a below average curveball. Your scouting eye will probably tell you that it's a below average curveball, but your scouting heart and what your scouting mind and your experience will tell you is that if we change this guy to a slider, then he might have the ability to take off.
Did you ever think, or anybody ever think, Mike Trout was going to be what Mike Trout is? A guy from New Jersey? Turns out to be the face of the game, and the guy is like one of the most unbelievable players and hitters in the game. But Eddie Bain took that risk. I mean, taking a high school hitter from New Jersey is a risk.
There's a part for the analytics and stats, of course, but there's also the part of being at the ballpark, seeing the player, seeing how he moves, how he runs, his run speed, his arm strength. Those are kind of things that stats don't tell.
You can't be completely old school and you can't be completely research and development.
And most clubs are coordinating them pretty well. I know the GMs that I had with Seattle, they saw to it that the analytics department and the scouts meshed. You know, they didn't like guys battling each other all the time.
There'll be guys that we'll turn in as scouts and we'll have discussions in the draft room, and the analysts will bring up, they'll either concur with some of the things we're seeing with the eye, or maybe they'll bring up some questions to ask. And in the end, what we're trying to do is get the player right.
We have models and we use models. So, but it's not something that is spit out and generated and we draft off. It's a piece of I call it a pizza. We have a big pizza and there's all kinds of pieces of it, and that's a piece of it.
At the end of the day, you have to be able to evaluate the heart and the passion of the player's desire to play. And there's nobody more gifted in the world to make those judgments than the area scouting supervisor. They're the ones that see them, they're the ones that know their families, they're the ones that understand their environment, see how they interact with their teammates, what the players' habits are like, their desire and passion and love to play. The amateur scout is the one who's best to make that evaluation.
The tilt towards analytics and away from the expertise of the amateur scout is just one of many changes taking place in baseball today. Artificial intelligence and biomechanics are starting to play a big role in player analysis too. Most scouts keep their eyes carefully focused on an uncertain future.
Most of us work on year-to-year contracts, and basically there's a little butterflies in your stomach after every draft, that like lull between, the summer starting like August to September to October. It's kind of like, yeah, I know I did a good job. I know I hustled. I know I got everything in on time. I hope they'd still like me,
I never worry about it. I just worry about going out and doing my job the best I can do. Bust your butt, do the job as good as you can do it, and everything will take care of itself.
It's kind of like I always said, people have to work with control paranoia, if that makes sense. So if you work with that control paranoia, you shouldn't have to worry about your job from year to year, because if you're really taking care of what you're supposed to be doing, as far as whether it be an area scout, a regional cross-checker, national cross-checker, or even a scouting director, if you're successful at what you do and you have an understanding of what the GM and everybody's wanting to do with the ever-changing time of analytics and pure scouting, that as long as you're doing your job and you're doing your job to the best of your ability, it shouldn't be a problem year to year.
I'm very disappointed to see the number of teams letting go of veteran scouts who've paid their dues.
Steve Nichols spent his whole life in baseball. Great scout, Florida scout. In 2010-ish, Steve Nichols looks at this kid pitching at a small college in Florida, likes him, and keeps it on the down low. Talks to the coach, when you're gonna throw him again? I don't wanna see him just for an inning, I wanna see him for a couple innings. He's doing his homework. The draft comes, he wants to draft the kid much higher, but the team doesn't want him to draft at that point. They don't want to spend a draft pick on him. Eventually, in the 9th round, the 272nd player taken, they take Steve Nichols' guy. Well, this 272nd player is Jacob deGrom. Wins back-to-back Cy Youngs. And here's the sad part of the story. Steve Nichols, soon after getting deGrom, is let go by the Mets. He can't get a job in baseball now.
In June of 2023, 17 former scouts sued Major League Baseball for age discrimination. They say MLB and its teams acted intentionally to prevent the employment of older scouts and refused the re-employment of older scouts after the pandemic. They are seeking class action certification in federal court.
There are hundreds of scouts out there that can't get work now. They work for 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden somebody comes in, they want to change things around. And like another friend of mine who was the general manager said, he says, oh, it's a young man's game. Well, what are you going to do when you're older? You're a young man now. You're in your 40s. What are you going to do? You'll be an older man. Is it going to be okay for you because you're making $1 million a year?
Like even in my situation in 2019, when I was let go in January, when you have a new GM that wants to make a change, there's nothing you can do about it. And when there is change at the top with the scouting director, there happens to be a fallout from there on down.
That's from the Scouts Professional Baseball Foundation. It was a Legends in Scouting Award back in 2016. That was the last year I worked. And that is a foundation that helps scouts that come on hard times. They've paid a lot of mortgages. They've helped guys with their health insurance.
You can't replace a George Digby or a George Zara or those guys that I watched those guys. And when I showed up at a ball game and I saw one of those guys that had been doing it 30, 40 years and successfully, I knew I was at the right park. And that's important when you're a first-year scout, because you're chasing dreams and you're running around out there and everything, and all of a sudden here's George Zara just standing around over there with no radar gun, nothing, just a watch in his pocket, and nobody knows who he is but me. So other scouts, I said, okay, all right, I don't need anything else. This guy had been doing it so long that he knew where he wanted and needed to be.
Those guys in those days, they didn't make much money, very, very little, if any, pensions, but they busted their rear ends and were all over the place trying to secure the best talent for their clubs.
When I came up, it was our eyes. We evaluated with our eyes and right here. But most of the veteran guys tell me it's just not the same.
What you don't want scouts to do is feel like they shouldn't go and chase a lead on a player.
They're up against their institutional knowledge being taken away from them, their credibility and their pride. And when you lose your pride, it's very hard to do your job.
Bard's shot exemplified that. She came to me and said, what do we need scouts for? All they do is watch games.
Indeed, the baseball scout watches games. Hundreds of games and thousands of players every year. In many ways, it's the scouts who hold the very future of the game in their hands.
Well, I don't think we have the future of Major League Baseball in our hands, but it's an interesting concept.
The city of Livonia over here, the next suburb over, used to have 20 teams with 18 and under kids on it. So that was probably 300 kids in the summer playing baseball. Now they have none.
We got to get more kids playing baseball. We've lost 5 million baseball players to soccer this year alone. We went from 27% black athletes down to 5 or 7%.
You got to get the black athletes, inner city athletes involved early in baseball.
The percentage of black players in Major League Baseball has been on the decline for decades. A recent study from the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sport at Central Florida University found black athletes represented just 6.2% of players on opening day rosters, down from 18% in 1991.
We've been dealing with this issue for 25 years. Major League Baseball has unlimited resources. Major League Baseball have academies all over the Caribbean. They're starting to build them now in the inner cities now, but there's so much more that they can do.
Growing the game is going to make it better. That's the only way. That's the only way to it. Is you got to grow the game of baseball. You got to get into your community and get people involved in the game, female, male, whatever it may be. Just spark some type of interest. And if you do that, we're going to be in a good place.
One thing I would like to see in the future of baseball is really an awareness to what it takes to play the game of baseball.
Now, with fewer minor league clubs, whenever you sign somebody in the draft, for example, you got to release somebody. I think we're losing a lot of good people that way.
There's less opportunities for players to play. We had a really exciting year with the Rangers this year. We had a 30th round pick out of Adrian College in Michigan, a shortstop by the name of Ryan Doro. There's no 30th round in the draft anymore. We think about will there be a player like that from Division III college get the opportunity again?
There's less emphasis on strategy, less emphasis on fundamentals.
They don't work at things anymore. Batting practice is just a home run contest. There's no more situational hitting, and you see it in every game. Recent game I watched with the Phillies and Yankees, the Phillies were 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Not once did they try to just make contact to get the runner in from third base.
Kids like action. You know, I know the home run is action, but with the home run, you're not seeing, you know, a lot of base stealing. You're not seeing a lot of hit and runs. You're seeing a lot of strikeouts, walks, and home runs.
There's not that many players in the major leagues that hit for average anymore. You think about offensively, I want to say I counted 11 players in all of Major League Baseball this last year that hit over 300.
Fans don't like strikeouts. They like home runs, but they don't like strikeouts. They're not going to see more base stealers because the guys aren't going to worry about injuring themselves or anything like that. They're going to stay clear because they're making the big bucks.
Yo lo que quiero es el amor. Para los tiempos de antes, el pelotero jugaba con más amor, con más deseo, no se importaba el dinero. Pero yo sé que hay muchos peloteros que juegan con ese amor. Hay otros que lo más importante es el dinero.
And you take away the things that made going to a game enjoyable, and you take away the emotion of the game, even something as simple as a manager arguing with an umpire or a hard play at second base, a fair play, but a hard slide in a second. You're taking away all the little things that make baseball special.
And I don't know if the ball's juiced or not, but I don't know how 120 guys hit 20 home runs this last year. Either they're that much bigger and stronger or there's something going on. I don't know.
It's a different game than what my father grew up. It's a different game that I watched.
I think it's a societal issue. It's not like baseball. It's like we want instant gratification in everything we do nowadays. It's never been like that before in my life, at least. And so that's why people want home runs, you know, and they want to see the big show.
I think that pendulum is going to swing back. Right now, we've got a lot of strikeouts and a lot of home runs. I think that pendulum, it's way up here. And I think that pendulum's going to swing back, and it's going to settle somewhere in the middle where we get, you know, more hitting, more guys bunting, more moving the run over.
And because of the way baseball is led now by, I refer to them as nerds, and people may not like that, but they're nerds.
Today, a lot of times, people become general managers almost before they do any other job in baseball. They have no really experience.
It's more a business now than it is a sport, and so and it's a very big business right at the moment.
But the game itself will survive. Bill Terry in 1920, Bill Terry, the Hall of Famer, said 1920, he said, baseball has to be a great game to survive the ownership, the idiots that run it.
You just hope 50 years from now that the game holds the value in people's hearts that it does now. That's where I think we all want this, and that's bigger than any scout. That's bigger than players. That's just, you know, you want the game to continue and thrive and grow.
Despite the challenges they face and an uncertain future, every single baseball scout in this film loved their job. They relish a life in the game, and they cherish this American pastime.
The thing I like best about the scouting life is being around baseball, is being able to go to the ballpark every day and watch young players play.
It keeps you about 18 to 20 years old your whole life. I'd like to say we never grow up.
I enjoyed going to the games, and I enjoyed watching kids play, and I enjoyed talking with people.
The fun thing about being at the ballpark and after the ballpark, you sit down, we talk baseball. And that's how you learn. You know, I've learned a lot from guys that have played.
And baseball people, we're just fun in general. I mean, they're just fun. I mean, we kid each other, we tease each other, and they're the best. Some of the best people I've ever known in my life.
When you've been in the game for so long, I'm a baseball lifer. Like I said, I don't have college education. This is all I know. This is what I love. And you build those relationships with players, coaches, staff.
And to this day, most of the guys that I signed and was around, we're still, they're family. We're family together.
I take a lot of pride in seeing them, you know, mature, get married, set themselves up for the rest of their lives. And that's what we get. You know, everybody says, you don't get a bonus. No, we don't get a bonus. We get a pair of keys and maybe a set of keys and a new car and say, go get them again. You know, the glory is amongst your peers.
You know, yes, you're trying to get players for your organization, but you're also trying to raise the game, promote the game so that everybody, you know, and obviously you're never going to get everybody, but you want people to enjoy watching the game of baseball. So, and that is something it's pretty cool, you know, that you can get a chance to promote the game and hopefully keep it going for another 150 years.
I keep getting dragged out by some of these scouts, you know, that, hey, would you come take a look at this guy? All right, I'll come see it. You know, or, so, you know, your grandfather or uncles here and there, you know, can you come see my grandson play or nephew play? But that's fine, you know, it's always in your blood.
You know, 57 years, I think. I'm not very good at math, but I think it was about 57 years I was in the game, and I just felt blessed every day that I did never have to go to work.
In early November 2023, the Texas Rangers, who lost over 100 games in 2021, were World Series champions for the first time in franchise history.
You get one of these at the end of the day. It's a World Series ring. Man.
This is my 25th year in baseball, and the club I've worked for has been to one other LCS. So I don't think anybody takes for granted, like, getting this far.
It's really hard to get to the playoffs. I'm getting a little older now, and how many times we're going to come back. Hopefully we got to, you know, I think our organization's built to where, you know, we can sustain this. That's what our goal is, and I think we have a minor league organization and a minor league system and people in place here with the Rangers. I think it's going to be a fun little run here for the next 7 to 10 years.
Just proud of all the guys, man. All the scouts that are here, all the scouts that work so hard, and all the players that are, you know, living their dreams out. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's baseball, it's Little League from the beginning, and then you're dreaming, and here we are with some of these guys.